Isekai, the genre of someone going to another world, where it be by transmigration, reincarnation, or another means. The general feeling of seeing someone being the first, or among the first, to explore this world. The ability to see new lands, meet new people, enjoy a new culture. How many agree with this definition? How many don't? Given the general public reception online of Isekai, I would say it seems that few hold this specific belief, and more often than not, Isekai is just seen as a genre for overpowered MCs, and it doesn't take long to pinpoint the primary cause of this. Japan. The Japanese have been doing Isekai for essentially a decade now, and popularized the genre. They have pushed it into the limelight and gotten the idea into mainstream acceptance. They have also run it into the ground, to the point that the average person recoils away from any mention of Isekai and makes a point to sidestep any show that is based on it. Japan seriously started off the genre with good shows that were predominantly loved, like Log Horizon, The Devil is a Part-Timer, and Problem Children Are Coming from Another World, aren't they? And Gargantia on the Verdurous Planet in 2013, and even The Familiar of Zero all the way back in 2006. Most of the isekai anime that was being produced were legitimately good, not to mention manga and web novels that were being translated and or produced at the time, like Rising of the Shield Hero and The Ambition of Oda Nobunaga in 2014. The closest thing to a generic bad isekai show during the early 2010s was Dog Days and Outbreak Company. It was fresh and new on the block, and the shows being aired were mostly noteworthy and enjoyable in their own right. The golden period of isekai in anime was a good 5 years, ranging from 2013 to 2017, perhaps even in 2012 to 2017, if you like the 2012 Ambition of Oda Nobunaga anime. Going from oldest to the newest, we have various bangers, starting with the previous 4 ones I listed for 2013, and No Game No Life, the second season of Log Horizon, and the Gargantia OVA in 2014. There was Gate, the lovely propaganda anime, and The Boy and the Beast, along with the edgy but popular Overlord anime in 2015. This was followed up by second seasons of both Gate and Overlord, Konosuba, Drifters, ReZero, and Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash in 2016, making this one of the strongest years of isekai anime period. However, this is where you could see the cracks start to form, with other more mediocre and forgotten isekai that also aired during the time, like Full-Time Magister, Norn 9, and Enduride. In 2017 is the year I would say marks the definitive end of most good content, and is the last good batch of isekai before it goes to hell. During this year, we got good content such as Recreators, Konosuba Season 2, the No Game No Life movie, Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, Drifters OVA, Restaurant to Another World, Overlord movies, and last which was Saga of the Tanya the Evil. This was also the year when the infamous In Another World with My Smartphone aired, along with other trash isekai, which aren't as well remembered, like Wangu Jiang Kyong, Knights and Magic, and Full-Time Magister Season 2. After this was the start of the rise of low-quality shows. 2018 only saw the release of 3 IPs, which were mainly enjoyed: the 2 seasons of Overlord, ReZero movie, and the Slime Isekai. The only other thing that might be considered good, at least for me, was the Isekai Izakaya anime, but I've only read the manga, so I can't vouch for it. Taking a stroll through the rest of the shows that aired during this season, however, shows just how much trash there was. Taking a look at 2019 is even clearer and shows the decline, with only a few solid shows that most liked out of the lineup of garbage, like Shield Hero, Konosuba, Ascendance of the Bookworm, and Isekai Quartet. Most of the rest of the shows are pure garbage, usually with writing being its reason. Another issue are the adaptations being subpar jokes, an issue we will come back to, like it was with Copcraft, a show with an amazing setting, but literally zero budget for any of the fight scenes, or just being a slightly controversial fetish anime. This is about where my personal experiences with actually watching anime come to an end, as this marks the point where I started to basically only read. But simply taking a glance at 2020 onward will show you the new trend. Gone are the days of predominantly good shows. 2020 specifically only has a couple of decent isekai shows that are all around liked, along with a hill of trashy ones, whether that be from poor adaptations or just shit writing in general. 2021 and 2022 aren't as bad. They are instead seem to be half and half. Half good shows that are mainly just sequel seasons, with a couple of new well-liked decent shows, along with more trash. This is further exacerbated from mediocre adaptations that are a step down from the original source material. Saihate Paladin and The World of Otome Games is Tough for Mobs are 2 of the 4 isekai anime I have watched from the most recent 2 years of airing isekai, and they both suffer the same problem. subpar adaptations that barely reach 7s, which I would have been better off using the time I spent watching to read the original source material instead. This showcases an issue with adaptations in general, which is that they tend to almost always be lesser in quality, that inherently remove parts from the original source material that knock down the adaptation in a few points. The 2 anime I gave above are prime examples of anime doing a bad job at adapting stuff, especially if it's from light novels or web novels, but this isn't exclusive to anime. 2 of my personal favorites and top recommendations when it comes to Japanese isekai novels are Cooking with Wild Game and The Ideal Sponger Life. These are 2 isekai novels that I genuinely think are 9 out of 10s, if not solid 10 out of 10s. You wouldn't see that if your introduction to them were their manga adaptations, which cut out a lot of the info and thinking that these novels have, which put them down to, at most, a 7 out of 10. There is overall an issue with a lot of these mangakas and these animation studios with doing an adaptation from a novel where they can't live up to the original source material most of the time. Can this be fixed or changed? I can't say. A prime example seems to be the Mushoku Tensei anime, which, according to public consensus, did a good job at adapting the light novel, something which the manga failed to do. You could also point to The Devil as a Part-Timer, which is an anime which also did a good job of adapting its source material. This shows that if it isn't an impossibility to do so, just that most studios somehow fuck it up in the process. There seems to be less of a chance to mess up manga adaptations, like the recent Isekai Oji-san that aired this last year proved, although some would say its average animation and its production delays would put it a point or 2 below the manga. However, considering most isekai are from novels, this is a small reconciliation. But I would say Japan's frequent inability to make adaptations that are truly on par, or even better than their original source material, is the lesser of 2 issues when it comes to Japan's isekai as a whole. The bigger and more prominent issue, in my eyes, comes from their writing, or more specifically, the typical lack thereof. This issue, which causes the main tumor on that of Japan's isekai, is in my eyes made of several specific problems. First, Japan's eye-rolling addiction and adherence to the generic JRPG Dragon Quest world setting when it comes to the normal isekai, in which someone from our world goes to another. Japan has essentially refused to adapt, or really switch things up from this boring fantasy type for I would say a good 90% of their standard isekai, unless it's for some otome game world where it's just a random medieval fantasy noble-centric that only has humans. It is very rare to find actual creativity when it comes to the world design, to the point where I could only list Genso Gourmet or Reborn as a Space Mercenary as actually doing a mix-up, with the former being an all-beastkin world, and the latter being a space isekai. There's also some of the prior ones I've already listed that also switch things up, like Drifters and Problem Children Are Coming from Another World. This is also seen with some, scratch that, most of their reverse isekai, if not all. They drag in characters from the generic Dragon Quest worlds as well. Granted, this at least has some more quality to it, both due to the relative freshness and nicheness of reverse isekai in the JP market and the story potential of it. However, them actually capitalizing on that potential is another matter. This is even seen in their very rare Observers Isekai. Isekai where someone from another world, not ours, goes to another world that's also not ours, with the most prominent Observers Isekai I can recall being Combatants Will Be Dispatched, and it does the same cookie-cutter Dragon Quest world as well. A second part of this tumor is Japan's absolute addiction to OP-ness and trivializing the story they are in, no matter if it's fighting-based or laid-back life-based. This stems from the work culture of Japan, which is so grueling that their target audience, who these authors go for, do not want to have to deal with any sort of real conflict or issue in these self-insert stories, which has led to the absolute slog of brainless isekai that are available. This is also linked with the third and final part of this tumor, which is the writing, or as I've said previously, the lack thereof. There is little attempt put into making riveting, unique, interesting, and most importantly, serious stories. For every story with an actual attempt at some plot or tale to it, there is 5 more that have nothing to stand out from the crowd, besides maybe an extreme niche that is likely dog shit anyways. Not to say that I only prefer some kind of overarching story when it comes to isekai. I highly enjoy the idea of an isekai where the protagonist just tries to live normally, one with no cheats or extremely niche knowledge that 99.9% of the population do not know about that allows them to get rich. But that very idea is antithetical with the Japanese audience who doesn't like the work in that kind of story whatsoever. To sum things up, there is an inherent problem with most isekai that is pushed out in Japan, in its anime, manga, light novels, and web novels. This is comprised of several issues, first being that the Japanese audience disdain any real conflict or effort and prefer cheats, whether it be financial like with a noble transmigration, physical like raw strength, magical like overpowered magic or lots of mana, or mental like with super obscure knowledge to make money with. Second, the lack of branching out from Dragon Quest-like worlds, excluding otome world settings which are getting stale themselves. Third, the serious lack of an attempt to make a riveting story most of the time. Fourth, and finally, the horrible track record at mangas and anime at adapting what few good isekai light novels and web novels there are. This has in turn led to the current state of Japanese isekai, and has in turn given a horrible name to isekai as a whole. A name that, in my eyes, is completely unjustified. There are good Japanese isekai to be found, rare and niche and perhaps user-subjective some may be, but even more so, there are vast quantities of good isekai to be found in the English market. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of prominent and well-respected titles to be found on Royal Road for free to read, which is the most prominent site generally for an overall collection of incredible reads if one is willing to try their hand at a book. Not to mention the countless to be found on Amazon, if one has the coin to spare. The English market has something that I see lacking in the Japanese market: serious stories and creativity. Even in the standard stories that play up the stereotypical Dragon Quest light world, you can always guarantee that at least it's typically above a Japanese counterpart due to its very strong likelihood to have a serious plotline, as opposed to the JP counterpart, which always treats its world with some level of detached playfulness, with no serious intention put into what happens in its universe. Is the English isekai market perfect with its originality? No, of course not. But while I may wish, even pray to see some isekais that go all out and achieve something on the par with some of the speculative evolution world-building projects like Codex Inversus or World of the Cluster as seen covered by the amazing channel Curious Archive, I can still say that the care given into the current English isekai stories surpasses the attention usually seen by the JP market and meets my current level of requirements for keeping the stories fresh and engaging. It hurts me. It hurts me to see how the genre has been treated and assumed to be by people who only stuck with anime and manga, who have not tried diving deeper to see what gems they can find. It hurts me to see a very successful and good but niche market of English isekais, with some of the best isekai stories I've ever seen, with most never surpassing 5 digits worth of fans. It hurts me to know that these stories will likely never see anime, or even comic adaptations of them to bring them more into the light. It hurts me to know and see those who have passed on what I think is the best medium for telling good isekai stories, because they don't like to read, and in the process, pass on some of the best stories they could ever likely enjoy. It has been a disaster. Japan has been a disaster for the reputation of the isekai genre. A disaster that could perhaps be remedied by more people expanding their range of entertainment and content they consume, but one that currently exists as it stands now. Will it be different years from now? Only time will tell. If you are still here, and want general recommendations for English web novels, I will have a list in the description pinned comments of this video. Until next time.